Something is happening, but you don't know what it is, do you, Mrs. Jones? Yes, and something is happening all over the world. We live in a theater without walls, just like Marshall McLuhan said. We live in a world that is largely unconscious. But while this situation has many facets, I would like to focus on how this relates to addiction and codependency. The world is filled with people who are struggling with addiction and codependency, like I was for many, many years, until finally, the truth has set me free. Only the truth will set you free. So we live in a world that is by and large unconscious. And one of the big reasons is denial. We deny the truth because mostly it is just too painful to face reality. Ayn Rand has said, the hardest thing to explain is the glaringly evident which everybody has decided not to see. So profound. Many of us struggle with addiction and codependency, but we don't even know what is happening or why. Most of us want to do well, but the truth is we just don't know how. When we try to talk to our friends and our family or even go to our doctor, it only seems to make it worse because they don't understand any better than we do. But something is happening, but you don't know what it is, do you, Mrs. Jones? Many of us want to deal with our addiction and codependency and the concomitant depression and anxiety. We want to be fighters. I always wanted to be a fighter. But how could I be a fighter when I didn't even know who the enemy was? I always used to love to quote what Theodore Roosevelt said. And he said, the credit belongs to the man in the arena, whose face is mired with blood and sweat and dust, who strives valiantly, but comes short again and again and again, because there is no effort without shortcoming, but strives to do the deeds. I always loved that, and I always used to quote it, but I could never really be the man in the arena. I could never really be a fighter because I didn't know who the enemy was. Because something is happening, but you don't know what it is. Do you, Mrs. Jones? And for such a long time of my life, I just didn't know who the enemy was. So I really couldn't be a fighter. But like Charlie Brown said, we have found the enemy and he is me. In other words, it's what happened to us when we were growing up as little kids. From the time we were 3 to 5 and beyond, it was the shame and the trauma. And being a really sensitive kid, I mean, that just made it all the harder. But it was that shame and trauma that I actually became shame. And I wasn't able to connect the dots till much, much later. But anyway, we have found the enemy, and he is me. And so only the truth will set you free. We were forced into hiding just to survive. We are forced to hide our feelings so we wouldn't be criticized or abandoned or even worse. We learned to project a false self to the world just to survive. And to all this, we were basically unconscious. All of us were basically unconscious because who was going to tell us the truth? For me, I finally was able to connect the dots, and that something was probably best summed up by Gabor Mate. And even though I've quoted this many, many times over the last months, especially, but he said it so well that, and something really well worth saying is worth repeating over and over and over and over again. He said, addiction is not a choice. It is an attempt to escape human suffering. Addiction is an attempt to escape suffering. What people need in response to addiction is not judgment and not simply symptom control. They need to be helped to heal from their trauma. The more hurt that people are, the more they need to escape. The addiction was not the problem. The problem was that you had a lot of emotional pain that you didn't know what to do with. So the addiction was an attempt to solve a problem. People have a problem that they don't know how to handle. People have emotional pain, deep emotional pain, that they don't know how to resolve on their own. And that is just so profound and so true. So addiction and codependency was really an attempt to solve a problem. Only problem is that most of us come to realize at some point that this strategy is not working. And so we come to the point where we kind of say, and conceptually, something is happening, but you don't know what it is, do you, Mrs. Jones? I'm just so thankful that I've been able to connect the dots myself. And it took me a long time, but it's been an incredible journey. But I've learned so much, and I've learned that only the truth can set you free. And that understanding of that relationship between shame and trauma that we struggle with when we were just little kids growing up, and how that so affected us and set the course for the rest of our lives. And we carried around the shame with us. And we didn't even know. We didn't even know what was happening to us. We just thought that this was the new normal, that this was normal, but this shame, this pain that we carried around, that we tried to hide. And the only thing that made us feel the way we wanted to feel was when we were using. And then we felt the way we always wanted to feel. There was one program I was watching a year or two ago, and it was about a military guy who was suffering post-traumatic stress. And he was also an alcoholic. And he said something profound. He said, us alcoholics, we don't drink to get high. We drink to feel normal. And I so relate to that. I just wanted to go to that place where I could feel the way I wanted to feel, where I could escape from that shame that I was carrying with me all my life. So being able to connect the dots and really realize that relationship, what is the only thing that's going to set you free. So on my journey, I talked about the many people, because one thing connecting the dots is we can't do it alone. I tried so hard to figure it out for myself, and I just went further and further down the rabbit hole. So there's been so many people in my life that have helped me on the path to recovery, and to be able to connect the dots and to be free, to be happier than I've ever been. And one thing that's so important too is community, is to find other people that you can relate to, and you can talk about your feelings. You can talk about what you've been through. You can talk about becoming a people pleaser. You can talk about becoming a reactor. You can talk about these things freely, and you can talk about it's okay to be human. It's okay to be a human being and to be who I am. It's okay to talk about my feelings and without shame to speak my feelings, and other people can understand and relate, and we can talk about this and discuss. And one of the big things is groups where we can talk about these things and help each other and communicate with each other and know that we're not alone. And that's how we recover. So anyway, my journey, if you're really understanding more about what I'm talking about right now, every podcast, this is number 35, every podcast I've done is talking about this journey. It's talking about the truth will set you free. It's talking about something is happening, but you don't know what it is, do you, Mrs. Jones? That's what I'm talking about. And I'm talking about the path to freedom. And don't worry, what I would do if you were more interested, if you really wanted to understand the process of recovery, I would go and listen to every podcast that I've done. Don't worry, it'll only take you a couple days, but I think you'll find it quite interesting. It's so interesting to me. But anyway, something is happening, but you don't know what it is. Do you, Mrs. Jones? And that is so true for so many of us. But if you want to understand what is happening, you can. You really can. And it's really not that complicated. So anyway, that's about what I wanted to say today. But whatever you do what Albert Einstein said, and always, 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 always question. Question everything. Question everything. And never, ever, ever give up. Keep moving. Martin Luther King said, if you can fly, fly. But if you can't fly, run. If you can't run, walk. And if you can't walk, crawl. But you gotta keep moving. So keep moving, keep questioning, and we'll see you next time.